All right, so I'm here with Robby Redmond with Redmond Lending in Huntsville and Guntersville, right? Is that right?
Huntsville, Guntersville, Nashville, Jacksonville. We're in 5 states.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
but we all
Well,
live
and I
here,
forget
so.
about that. I know you from
But
Huntsville and Guntersville, but
here, this is home.
sure.
So.
And he has agreed to be our third guest on the third episode.
It's exciting.
It's third episode, but the second episode I lost audio. So for those that are watching, this would be their second episode. But
This is 2.5. So
yeah, 2.5. That's perfect.
Right.
So I'm happy to have Robby on. There's many things that we're going to get into today that I think are important. Robby, main thing is I think that a lot of people want to know who you are. So obviously we're going to get into what you do and your mission and the mission work that you do, your faith, those things. But I want to start off by just letting you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are, what your upbringing was, how you got into lending. We want to know about you.
yeah, that's a complicated question. It may take a couple of podcasts, but I always like to start with the end in mind. So where we are now. Robby Redmond, own Redmond Mortgage Group, otherwise known as Redmond Lending Group. I've got a wife, Valerie, and 3 kids, one in Auburn, just started, Caroline, and I've got Sam, who's a senior, who's on his way. They're actually in Auburn now. He's interviewing for a scholarship down there. And then Jenna Beth, who's in 8th grade. So we've got our hands full, and we're in transition, in that time of life, where we're working and, kind of becoming halfway empty nesters. So there's some excitement with that, and there's some trepidation with that as well.
Sure.
But I've been in finance. I've been in banking and finance for more than 25 plus years. It's really encapsulated. Well, has half my life. I just turned 50, so it is more than half of my life has been devoted to that work. And so started and really as a kid, I lived here in Guntersville. And worked in a grocery store called Food World. If everybody, it's local in Marshall County where Foodland is now in Guntersville. That used to be Food World when I was a teenager. And I was thinking about that driving up here. Honestly, that was probably my favorite job that I've ever had, ever. I loved the grocery business. I loved working there. I loved everybody I worked with. Those were some good old days. I really miss that. It was simpler for sure. But worked for that company for 10 years, got the tail end of that, worked as an accountant, as a staff accountant, got married, moved to Atlanta, worked for a company out there, did some, I was an analyst for a company out there, and was about to we were looking at moving to Chicago. I had an interesting story where I really wanted to get into equities or commodities. And I had an opportunity with a buddy of mine up in Chicago and was about to interview with them, and really got derailed in 2001. My parents were on a mission trip in Montana, and on their way back had a terrible accident, and which left my dad a quadriplegic. A lot of people know that. A lot of people don't know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So anyway, he was totally incapacitated from the neck down. And of course, we're newlyweds. My wife and I, we were married right at a year. In fact, we spent our first year anniversary between hospitals in Montana and Wyoming. My dad was in Casper. My mom was in Billings. So they were separated in hospitals. My mom had also catastrophic injuries. She was already legally blind, so she relied a lot on my dad for a lot of things, but certainly wasn't able to drive. And so after the accident, or during the accident, our entire lives were just thrown. We were thinking about Chicago. Now Chicago was totally out. Dad was in the hospital for right at a year, recovering. But we're long overdue. I could write a book on those days. I mean, those were some really trying days. Those were probably the most difficult days of our lives, of my life. Trying to get through that as a man of faith, I was really frustrated. I was angry at God. I didn't understand why we were going through such peril, why my parents had to suffer like they did. Learned a lot about His sovereignty and His overall plan. More probably longer years after that, but From those days, we were living in Atlanta. There's a place called Shepherd Center in downtown Atlanta. Some people may or may not know about Shepherd Center, but they're really the only facility that was equipped to take care of Dad. I mean, there was nobody, and not only take care of him, but kind of showed us how to take care of him. And we had to kind of become amateur nurses and caretakers. And in the process, we finally got Dad moved back home, which is here in Albertville, where Mom and Dad lived. My dad passed away back. It's been almost 10 years now. But when we got him back here, we felt like we were a million miles away, living in Atlanta, and so we made the decision to move back home. And I know that made a lot of our family happy to kind of settle back. But my wife and I are both. Now my wife and I grew up.
Timeline wise, when is this? You moved.
This was 2001 time frame. Now this is around 2002. Let's see, 2000. The accident may have been 2002. I'm trying to get my years mixed up. It's somewhere in that range. 2002.
Okay. Early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
That happens and you move back.
Yeah, June of 2002. Actually, I think is when it was. Now that I think about it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just try to get the timeline
absolutely.
right.
Hey, yeah, I'll mess that up anyway. So yeah, we. So the summer of 2002, everything changed. When about 2003, when we got him back home, and now my wife grew up. Background on her, she grew up on a farm, rural family area, a rich history and farming and agriculture, and very proud of that. But there was some urbaniteness in Valerie. She loves the big city, and so do I. And so we really were comfortable in Atlanta, loved Atlanta. You hear a lot of people, I want to avoid Atlanta. Like, we're attracted to it. We love it, everything about it. And so Chicago was something that was pretty exciting to us. And then to kind of move back to North Alabama, to Marshall County, was not as exciting for us. All these years now, I can't imagine living anywhere else. I mean, this is definitely home. This is where your family's at, and that's all that matters. But we got settled in, and that's how I ended up as a lender. That's how I really ended up in the banking business, because with the background that I had in finance, what am I going to do? But maybe work for a bank. There was a short time where I thought maybe I'd become a financial advisor. There was a lot of other avenues that I was considering, but had a really good opportunity with, at the time, Colonial Bank in Huntsville. I got hired in as a credit analyst, fancy way of saying an underwriter, more on the commercial side of the business. Really comfortable in that job, loved it. Did it for maybe, 3 months. Senior lender comes in my office, says, we're starting a new business banking division, and I want you part of it. And kind of set me free, basically, just to go out and just grow the business. I hated it. I did not want to do that.
What did you hate about it? Well, specifically?
Everything about it. I called my wife on the way home, said, I find another job. I can't do it. So, little known fact to some people, I consider myself an introvert. And now, doing what we do, doing this, you have to have all these interactions with people. You have to be social. You have to go to events. Listen, if I'm at any event, my most comfortable spot would be a chair in a corner. Yeah, just watching everybody.
Believe it or not, I'm right there with you. That's the area that I go to. Is I'm going to go stand in a corner and analyze the room. Yeah, try to figure out. I would rather just stand over there.
Listen, I'd rather just get in a corner in the fetal position sometimes. Like, it's not the comfort for me. I mean, I can do it, and like on Sunday mornings, like during church, I feel, hey, we're here, and you got a lot of people that visit that don't know people. I've been here forever, so I know a lot of people in church. So, I take the time to shake hands and talk to people and try to get to know people. And those of you that know Brandon Love at our church, he knows everybody. My daughter, who's now in Auburn, she's also a socialite. She knows everybody. And so, there's times where they would look at me from a distance and they just kind of laugh and snicker, like, look at the introvert, talking to people, because they know how hard it is. But I think being an introvert doesn't mean you're not social. It just means it takes more energy. And I think kind of going back to those days, as an introvert, being an analyst and your spreadsheet and all that, just kind of leave me alone. I can go to lunch, and I mean, that's great, but now you're taking me out of that, and I've got to interact for a living and sell. And that's not something that, was appealing to me at all. And I really, really thought I was just going to, I was going to quit. I didn't think I was going to last. What transpired in the months that after that really surprised me. Really, I began to enjoy it. In fact, I would even use the word love. I loved doing that. It gave me a freedom in the workplace that I'd never experienced before. I was always really either tied to a desk or tied to four walls, or, if I was in the grocery business, I was still tied to the store. And, but being able to go from business to business, having coffee and lunch. I mean, my kids, growing up, they'd always say, how cool is it? Dad gets to drink coffee for a living, and more or less it is what we do for a living. It's part of the appeal for me. So yeah, in the beginning, didn't like it. But, you kind of track all this back from mom and dad's accident to, taking the job at the bank as an analyst and then kind of becoming a lender by happenstance. Nothing I planned, nothing that I desired to do or sought, but it's all these years later, the rest is history, really. So
it's funny that you say that you didn't like it, because what you were doing then is basically the exact same as what you're doing now. And you've, you not only just do it, you are one of, at least from the outside looking in, obviously I don't see your metrics, but from outside looking in, you are one of the more successful, one of the most successful in the area. When you think of mortgage brokers, Redmond Lending is one of the first that you think about, at least in this area. And so for you to transition from hating being a credit analyst and hating your job doing that to, what do you think switched? What do you think it's a certain set of values or certain set of skills that you learned? Was there some kind of pursuit of something in that? What do you think the switch was caused by?
That's hard. That's a good question. I think now when you were talking about success, I always, to me, success has to be defined. You have to define success. And for me, that has evolved over the years. I'm a dreamer. I love to think ahead. In fact, that's probably even to a fault. I've got people on my crew, some of my leaders around me that work with me every day. I think I worry some of them occasionally because I'm always thinking big. I'm thinking down the road, and they're like, "Hey, Robby, we got Tuesday. We got right now." But I don't know if anything really changed. I think more than me changing, I think God more or less revealed another world that I was just closed off to. I really wasn't considering. But I think, I always like to have a good time. I always like to have fun, behind the scenes. Being an introvert is being an introvert, but people that know me really, really well, they'll argue that point. They'll think, you're not an introvert, Robby. And that's just because when I'm around certain people.
When you're comfortable with
like I'm goofing off, I'm doing things and saying things and just to have fun, you know. And so it doesn't appear that I'm introvert, but it's just because it doesn't take as much energy when you're around those people. Doing this all these years, I feel like in some ways has allowed me to generate more of those types of relationships, more of that comfort zone, so that I've had a lot of fun, honestly. But yeah, if we go to a chamber event or we go to where there's a mixed crowd, I'll be chain smoking coffee cups. Like, man, I'm just like coffee drinking all this just to keep the energy level. I'll drink Red Bulls, whatever. But yeah, nothing's really changed. I really enjoy it. I would tell you that my perspective changed around 2009, 2010. There was a life event that we could talk about that really changed my perspective in both my career and my personal life. And that change of events really is why Redmond Lending Group is what it is today. People probably saw on the internet a week ago. I didn't really want to go to the luncheon. My wife was encouraging me, but we were recognized in the state of Alabama for mortgage brokerages in the state of Alabama.
I saw that. Congratulations, by the way. That was a big deal.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's I guess we're in an industry where we're always real estate agents and mortgage people I wouldn't say pat ourselves on the back, but if it's from a distance, it looks that way. Like, hey, I won this award, and I'm like, I just want to go do the work, and all that stuff's great. My wife was explaining to me and encouraging me with that. Like, listen, you got a lot of people that work for you, and you got to celebrate the wins. This is not about, you, or not even the company, but it's about them. It's about all that you guys have accomplished. And so there's 366, if I recall, licensed brokers in the state of Alabama that they may not be based out of Alabama, but they can do business in Alabama. And out of those, we're number 10 in market share. So there's a lot to be celebrated there, coming from our humble beginnings, which just started out with just me. I never, ever, ever sought this out. Never thought for a second that we were to compete for market share in the state. I jumped out of the airplane, so to speak, from a banking world to go independent, to just explore different options, and certainly wasn't thinking about this. But yeah, so that's, I can't think of anything that's changed. I would say back in 2009, 2010 is really the pivotal point that's come full circle to where we are today. That was two things that happened. Of course, we had Caroline, we had Sam. And then after them, we had a miscarriage, which was pretty devastating. And then continued after that, we were going to have another child, and Valerie she almost went 5 months in that time, and then miscarried again. Gosh. Had to go through a DNC procedure. It was really traumatic, and I'll never forget Valerie laying there in the hospital bed, and she was recovering. And we had always talked about adoption, as if it was something that we would consider. And she just asked me, said, "What do you think about fostering?" And I thought, whew. And honestly, as her husband, my main focus was just her care at that moment as she's recovering, and we're just going through a lot right now. And I thought, the roller coasters of that, is that something we want to pursue? I was really more worried about her. But she said, "Yeah, that's fine, but that gives us an opportunity because we've got all this love to give." And I feel like I've got more to give. And, we could maybe even save a life, make an impact on someone's life at the very least. So how could I say no? So I said, sure. And I'll never forget, we left the hospital. She had to stay overnight or maybe 2 nights. And on her way home, she's a guidance counselor in the school systems. And so she's sort of connected to DHR and some people there. And she made a phone call. And I mean, this was like on a weekend. And they said, "Yeah, we've got our first class to get certified coming up Monday." I mean, talk about calling your bluff. Wow. I mean, this was happening. And so we called some friends of ours. They rallied around, watched our Caroline and Sam at the time were young, obviously. And long story short, went through 10 weeks of that training. And on the after that, we were introduced to Jenna Beth, who is our 8th grader. She was 2 days out of the hospital, which never happens. And just through a series of events in her situation and the parents, they sought us out to adopt after we were fostering for, I guess, about 6 or 7 months at that time. And so, but that also preceded a conversation. I think I told you this at lunch. I wanted to share this too. So while all this is going on, I'm having a conversation with Wiley Bailey, probably months prior to this.
Wiley is one of your loan officers that you have.
That's correct. Yeah, he works out of Northeast.
Is he would you consider, as far as production goes, is he the top loan officer you have?
He is, yeah. He's our top producer. He and I exchange as far as being the top, but I don't really consider myself as much of a producer as, but I would consider him the top producer.
No, I was just giving some context.
Wiley has been with me from the very beginning, and a very, very good friend of mine. Some people know Wiley's a bivocational pastor and pastors a church, Concord Baptist, not too far from here. He happens to be my wife's cousin, so whether I like it or not, I got to put up with him. So anyway, everybody loves Wiley. He's great. So he and I, though, at the time, he was in college, and we're having this sidebar conversation about just jobs. He's like, so tell me about banking and all that, and I'm like, it's a job. It pays the bills. And so he said, if you could do anything you want to do, anything, what would that be? And I said, I'm just like, man, I just want to be in the ministry. I just want to be about God's work. But he's like, so you want to be a pastor and be a preacher? I was like, I don't know. I've never really thought of myself of that. Now, in recent months, I've had to think about that more often. I've had a church approach me, so it made me think more and harder about that lately. But at the time, it was as far as Pluto, and so I thought, no, I don't know if I'd be equipped for that. I don't know if I got the patience, the discipline, all that it takes. But I know a lot of pastors. A lot of them are really good friends of mine. And I thought, man, if I could just work alongside them, maybe some pastoral care, maybe some training, workshops. I don't even know what it looks like. I'm just making it up. Next thing you know, someone's like, hey, supper's ready, and we're off, and forgot about it. It was just a candid conversation. About 3-4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks or so later, I'm in my office at the time working. I was a market president for Compass, BBVA Compass at the time. Sitting in my office, get a call. It's from my pal, Keith Langner, who was our senior pastor at the time. And he says, hey, so got an opportunity. I want to take you and Matt to India if you'd consider that. And I'm like, well, what's the mission? And he proceeds to say, well, we're going to be doing training and workshops and basically everything that I'd said.
You just
oh,
said
man, it's like he was listening to the conversation. Of course, he had no knowledge of that. And I remember him saying, well, talk to Valerie about it. You guys pray about it. I'm like, no, I don't think. I mean, we're going to pray about it, but not whether I should go or not. I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be there. Now, all this is happening around the same time as Jen and Beth comes into our home. And so my very first mission trip that I had ever been on, I had not been on a single mission trip before, not even local, was going to India. And and for anyone's ever been to India or anything like that, it's a booger, man. It's hard. I mean, we flew, I think that first one we flew from, and I'm not a really big guy, but I'm tall. I'm 6'2", maybe. And I was sitting in the middle seat and coach, my knees up against, we got like an 8-hour flight to Paris. This isn't something, you're really looking forward to travel-wise. Maybe a few hours of layover in Paris and then another 10 or 11 hours over to Bangalore, India. It's tough. It's a very hard trip to get over there.
I think the longest flight I've ever been on was 8 hours.
Yeah.
And
that's not easy,
man.
Yeah,
I was miserable. It was the work, my legs go numb, knees aching, wanting to get up and walk around. So that sort of flight does not sound enjoyable to me at all.
Well, I should never say this, especially on a podcast. It's going to go online, but this last trip, we're kind of make our way to Africa here in a minute. But I'm like, listen, I'm too old for this, and I'm going to upgrade. I've got points. I'm going to take advantage of it. So I may or may not have flown first class to Africa and back this past trip.
A flight that's that long is probably well worth it to do that.
I don't even know if I should apologize for that. But anyway, I honestly no regret. Your regret with that. Once you go first class,
apologize for that.
Once you go first class, you don't really want to go back there again. But certainly, that's a hard trip for sure. And I could tell you unequivocally when I get to India and exposed to abject poverty like you can't describe. We don't understand it. I remember one of the missionaries saying, "Yeah, our poor people are skinny here, or versus in America, we have so many resources. Even if economically, if we're lower class or poor, you can still eat." I grew up. I think, I'm pretty sure we were considered lower class growing up. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had plenty compared to that. But the work that we did there was captivating. The training of those pastors really trained me, and it taught me something about myself and what God built me to do and made me to do, and that was to be a missionary. As unequivocally, I knew right then and there that was what I was built to do. Now, back home, I'm a father. I just taken on our third child, adopting. Got a lot going on. So it's not like, hey, honey, I'm coming home and we're going to move to Southeast Asia or whatever. And so God began a work in me and a work in us to really manifest the work of missions, global missions, local missions, in how, through our church, but also through me personally, and how we support missions in the background. So fast forward to 2019, middle of the summer of 2019, I decided to get out of banking and just start my own thing. And again, my ambition to do that was more motivated by the fact that I felt like, for years I'm making the banks a lot of money. I might as well just do this on my own kind of thing, have a little more freedom. And, sometimes when you're working for a company and you're like, I would do it this way, but they're not going to do it. And you're like, listen, I'll just do it. I can do it my way. The downside to that is a lot of times my way is not the right way. And I've had to learn as an owner, as a manager, a lot over the last few years. But about 2 years into Redmond Lending, we started growing. Obviously, the interest rates, in 2020, 2021 were rock bottom. I remember thinking and saying to people all the time, I've never seen them this low before. I don't think we're ever going to see them any lower. And as soon as I'd say that, they'd just go lower, continued. And so loans were just coming from everywhere. And we were growing, of course.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people that are involved with, obviously mortgage lenders who we network with the most. And every lender talks about how much money they made during COVID, 2020, 2021, talking about the sheer volume of loans coming in the door just because of how the interest rates were, people refinancing, buying houses. And I don't think anybody's a stranger to that. The housing market was certainly objectively booming during those times. I'm sure as a lender, you had loans flowing.
Yeah, the funny thing is, so when I started Redmond Lending Group, I actually started it with the mindset of commercial.
Really?
Most of my banking career really encapsulated commercial business. It wasn't until the last, say, 6-7 years I was really doing a lot of construction loans, residential construction loans, which really exposed me more to the mortgage side of the business. And we originated a few mortgages here and there. So when I started Redmond Lending, I thought I'm going to focus more on small business, SBA, things like that. And I could do it nationwide. So I had some pretty good connections through, my years in banking. I ended up getting a mortgage license really just as a secondary because I thought, well, my clients are going to need a mortgage, so I want to be able to service them. And so, I kind of just got into it with that mindset. So when we first started and rates were really, really dropping, you were talking about all these loan officers making more money. We didn't really. We were doing okay, but it was almost as if the Lord brought us through that period of time where it was going to help us ramp up because I had to hire help. Had to hire processors. We were growing during the COVID years, of course, but not to the effect where someone has been doing mortgages for years and years and years. Now, I had a lot of experience in banking, and certainly mortgages were a part of that, but focus solely on mortgages was not necessarily the plan. And so I think a combination of those two things, we weren't blowing and going like some of those were. We certainly were doing okay, though. What the challenge really came when the market got tough. And we had a lot of new loan officers on board where, they hadn't developed the network. And me being in the business for such a long time, I had a network. People like Wiley, he had a natural network and a few others. And so, but, the last few years have been tough for everybody. Yeah. And we've been really grateful. I feel maybe the Lord has shown us favor in that area. I would never sit here and say we're the greatest, we're the best, I'm the greatest, I'm the best. I think we're just fortunate. I really do. I know, and I've seen God's hand at work. Everything to me, it's not so much out of fear, but out of reverence. I just say, hey, listen, if the Lord wants us to succeed, He's going to allow it. And if He doesn't, we'll fall. We'll fail. And I'm not afraid of failure. We can fail forward. And I preach that message all the time. The worst enemy for me is not trying.
Right.
So
I think the fear of failure actually brings on you almost speak failure into existence by doing that because those who are afraid to fail tend to do things or tend not to do things that would have resulted in a much bigger success for them. But because they're afraid to fail, they don't take the shot,
100%.
And therefore the fear of failure causes failure by not taking seizing those opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. Well, about 2 years into it, maybe 3 years into it, we're going on our 6th year now. So I'd say maybe 3 years ago, I called David, who at the time was the missionary. He's from Mississippi. He still lives in Mississippi, but he was just retired. The International Mission Board sort of dried up in their budget, and some of those that have been in the field for a long time were given an opportunity to retire early. David is one of those guys. They were in India for 10 years straight. Learned the culture, learned the language. Now he's back in Mississippi. And I called David up one day and I said, hey, listen, I've got this mortgage company and, the Lord has really shown favor our way, and we're doing pretty good. And I want it to be something more though. I know that I was not made to be in the mortgage business.
Right.
That's where he's got me now. And certainly I've had opportunity to share my faith. I've had opportunities to make an impact on people's lives and have their lives impact me. And I served through the local body of the church as an elder, and I've really enjoyed just where God has me. But I just sense there's something more, something's missing. I know that I'm made to be a missionary somehow. And I always thought maybe when I retire, I'll be like you or something. So I said, if there's a way that we could impact the mission field somehow by what we're doing, I've just got to know. And anybody's in the mortgage business knows this is really hard. It's really, really hard. I joke about it sometimes because I shouldn't say this, but if you're ever watching a superhero movie, any superhero movie from a cartoon to DC Comics or whatever, you always wonder in those fictional characters, there's the background, the world is just going about their business. And they have no idea that these superheroes are battling it out. And if they fail, the world's going to come to an end. Like they have absolutely no idea. And I think, sometimes the superheroes in the real estate business are real estate agents, mortgage loan originators, insurance agents, a lot of us in the background, not to call ourselves superheroes, but, sometimes things happen. And we're battling all those fires, and we're putting out all those fires all the time to make it a smooth process for the consumer. And 99% of the time, we're really successful in that. Sometimes things happen, but to suffice to say, it's hard. It's a hard business to get into.
And that's a great analogy too, because I never really thought about it till you said that. But there's so many steps in the process of buying a home and getting somebody a mortgage and insuring that. And I've never really thought about it that way until you said that. I mean, the consumer, the borrower, the buyer, whatever you want to call them, they only see like what, maybe 2%, 3% of what actually goes on. I mean,
sure.
The stuff that goes on in the background is.
And I think if we're good at what we do, that's what it should be.
Yes.
We don't want, it's a daunting process. Nobody's buying a home because nobody wants a mortgage anyway. Let's just put it that way. Nobody's looking to get a mortgage. They're looking to buy a home. And no one's looking for an insurance policy, but they want that home to be secured. And so what we do, if we do a good job, is that we're handling all the hard stuff, the difficult stuff. We're shielding them from that, but we're walking with them in that process to make sure that their experience is, say, even fun. How could we make a mortgage experience fun? Well, I feel like we've done that and we can do that. We've got to do what we do really well to do what the end game is. And so anyway, going back to David, I called David and said, hey, listen, this is a hard business. And I want what we do to count for more. Every time we close a loan, I want it to count for the kingdom. So I don't even know how to do it. I don't know what to do. I'm going to create it in a budget. Every time I close a loan, there's going to be some capital almost set aside. And brother, I'm just going to give it to you. I just trust you. I don't know what else to do. And he pointed to a guy named Joe that I maybe had briefly met in India at the time years ago. And Joe works in Africa. Joe lives and his family lives in Virginia. They are currently in Africa full time. The entire family, his wife's out there, his daughter, and they are working in an organization. He's a director of an organization called Training to Send. And what Training to Send does is a lot of the work that we did in India, but it's a more of a proactive ministry where it's a simple ministry really, where they are training new converts, new believers, expecting those converts, those Christians to train another and then to train another. So you share your faith with me, and then you share with me how to share that faith with someone else, and then so on and so forth. It's a great picture of, toward the end of Acts, we see Paul, and he reaches all of Asia. And I'm just amazed by that, because we know that happened in about 2 years. And the Bible says roughly 8 million were reached. And, if they were counting women and children, who knows? So maybe 15 million, but millions and millions of people were reached. And there wasn't a train, there wasn't planes. All of Asia is a big, space. And they did it not because Paul was out preaching and then he traveled and got on his airplane and, they were training, he trained Timothy, who trained another one, and he trained another one, and so on and so forth. And that multiplication happened. That's what's happening in Africa. There's over 27 countries now. that have been reached. Over 50,000 have been baptized. Over 3,000 churches, new churches are being planted over there.
Now, is this done through one particular organization?
It is.
Or is it just a collective group of,
Yeah,
how is it structured?
Training to Send, and not a single person that works for Training to Send earns a single dollar. There's no salaries. 100% of any monies that flow through Training to Send goes straight to the field, straight to the work. And so so what they have, what they call sort of a master trainer model that basically it's for lack of, I hate to use the word apostolic, but basically like the apostles, where they were, in charge of training pastors, and then they would train the pastors. And so what we do, our part of that is that we're over there. In fact, we're in the middle of Dustin, who's going with another Dustin from Huntsville. They're going, but our church is committed to maybe 5 or 6 trips this year into next year to complete a doctrine training, 12 modules. It kind of comes out of the Baptist Faith and Message, but it's been kind of condensed in 12. And so what we're doing is we're going and we're training these trainers so that they can train their trainers and pastors in their network. Very simple training. It's not that what we're training them is something that they've never heard of or don't know, but we're training them how to duplicate it so that it's easily taught, it's easily multiplied. But the work is clear, and the gospel is unstoppable when you just go. That's it. I mean, the bar, we've talked about in our industry, those that are successful, the bar is low. You just got to show up half the time. Just show up and do the work.
Yeah.
Same thing in the ministry. Just show up and do the work. And so we're seeing a lot of success in Africa, 27 different countries. We're starting to penetrate other countries and other continents as well. We have a goal to reach the entire continent of Africa with this. But Redmond Lending Group is very, very much involved in this. But it's not just Training to Send. There are other mission groups. There are other things that we want through the employees. So what's happened from that one phone call has not only gotten me involved personally with that ministry, our church involved. Now it's my life's mission to coordinate with other churches and other pastors. So I've been recruiting and talking. I have about at least once a week, mostly, or at least every other week, I'm having a lunch with a pastor or somebody that's affiliated with a church to say, hey, let me come to your church. Let me talk to you about Training to Send. I want to talk to you about connecting and just trying to grow that network, because the work is so great. I mean, we have to have more teachers and more pastors that are involved in this work, because it's so much that's to be done there. So behind the scenes, and we don't advertise this. I don't typically, it's not going to put up on a billboard and say, hey, if you're a Christian, come do work. Listen, we want to do a mortgage for anybody. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, atheist, Christian. We want to do a good job as a mortgage group. But I'm unashamed in saying the reason we exist, 1,000% reason why we exist, is so that the gospel is spread throughout the globe. And so we're hoping to raise, I hope it's okay to say this, we're hoping to raise $100,000 this year and for global missions efforts. So everything that we do, everything that we plan, we budget. So when I'm pressed with a challenge in Africa or Guatemala or Honduras or wherever, I'm thinking, how many loans do we need to close to get there?
Yeah.
That's my why. That's why I exist. That's why we exist. I'm convinced of that. Now, I would love to be on the field in these places. I love to go. I went back this early February or late January. We were there last April. Like I said, Dustin's going this April. But I know there's a value in what we're doing with Redmond Lending Group and how we're doing things behind the scenes, because every time we close a loan, every time we're growing into the Nashville market, Florida, all these 5 states I mentioned earlier, we're having the opportunity to make an impact. Yeah. And that's really why I do what I do.
What has that done for, what have you seen as far as your employees buy-in? Have your employees accepted that? I mean, I'm sure they have. You'd almost have to be crazy to say that you didn't, but I mean, have you seen any sort of increase on employee buy-in doing that? Are they bought into that mission?
Yeah, I like to think so. First off, I don't require it. I don't. I talk to people when I'm recruiting loan officers. I definitely disclose this. It's one of those things where it's like, listen, you don't have to be excited about this. this is what I'm excited about. If you're successful as a loan professional, loan originator, and you make a good living for your family, that's you, right? This is you for your family. It's a great opportunity for you. But just know what I'm doing with what you're doing in the background. If for any reason that bothers you, you obviously you need to know, because you're going to hear me talking about it a lot. And honestly, that's the only thing I'm obsessed about. And it may be to a fault. As I said, I don't have a lot of patience. I want to grow and continue to grow. Now we're here. We might as well win. We might as well, if we're in the top 10, we might as well get in the top 5. We might as well. And it's not so much so that we get attention. I don't seek attention. Don't have to have it. Don't care to have it. But if we can get in the top 5, if we can make those market moves, then it's more of those villages that we're reaching. There's a country, and it's called Sierra Leone in Western Africa, that's still sacrificing children. There's human sacrifice still going on. I couldn't believe it when I first heard.
Where did you say that was?
Sierra Leone. It's just south. If you know where Ghana is, it's sort of, I think it's between Ghana and Senegal, somewhere between there. But it's on the western shores or western side of Africa. And deep in those villages, deep in those woods, are just a darkness that you can't even imagine. And I knew a group that went there recently back in November, and they noticed that the village who'd recently been reached, the gospel had reached this village, and the entire village had been won for Christ. But they noticed something eerie, that there were maybe a few babies, and there was a lot of old folks. Like the youth had basically been eradicated. It's just a dark, dark practice. And when I think about how many loans is it going to take for us to make an impact so that we could save a village, so that we can reach a village? And that's when I wake up in the morning, when I go to bed at night. I mean, if you get on your phone, you can look at the apps that you spend a lot of time on. My calculator is where I spend most of my time on. And it's not about money. It's about units. It's about villages. It's about Bibles. It's about whatever. When Joe calls me and says, hey, we need camels, or we need motorcycles, or we need whatever, I'm thinking, how many loans we got to close? What do we got to do to get the need out there? And sometimes we can't do it. I'll be honest. I mean, we're not big enough, obviously, and God's not going to use Redmond Lending Group solely. So sometimes I'll pick up the phone and I'll say, hey, Jaylon, hey man, I need some help, bud. You got anybody And we'll start networking, and we'll raise the money. We'll do what we got to do. But my vision for this really is that Redmond Lending is going to exist to fuel and resource those efforts behind the scenes. But my personal goal and my vision really is not only through Redmond Lending Group, but also on the backside of that, I want to connect churches. I think there are so many churches out there that are just unaware. And I believe that the church today is ready. They're leaning forward. I think I mentioned this to you before. I mentioned this to another pastor a couple weeks ago. I think our churches are filled with people ready to work, ready to do something. We just got to give them the path to do that work. And I think if I said, hey, there's an opportunity to hop on a plane and go to Beijing tomorrow, they'd go. But then there's someone sitting right next to them that's going, I don't even feel comfortable here. I certainly wouldn't even want to go to a small group Bible study right now, much less than hop on a plane with you guys. And my passion is to meet those people right where they are, both of those people, and inch them toward, what we've experienced in Africa, what we experienced in India, because there's something about experiencing Christ in a place like that. 100%. I mean, I'm reminded of the writer of Hebrews. I think it's Paul, maybe Barnabas. Who knows who the real author of Hebrews? But I know that there's a part that says, Christ existed outside the camp. In other words, we get comfortable inside the walls of the church. I think Billy Graham was quoted once as saying the biggest mission field is inside the walls of the church. I believe that. But I also know that Christ exists outside those walls. Right. We've got to get outside those walls. And those are the places I'm more comfortable, is outside those walls, in those places, to penetrate those dark areas. And when you see, I told this story to a church a couple months back where, I kind of told it through maybe the third person or first person. I can't remember which perspective, but we, last April, we had to go through, I won't go through the whole thing, but man, we walked like 6 or 7 miles in 110-degree heat. It was awful. And we had to trek through a boat that I'm pretty sure that Jesus rode on. I mean, it was old. I wasn't sure it would float, but we went through, I would consider totally the ends of the earth. I mean, it was, I'd never been as far deep into the bush, as they would call it. And anyway, it had taken half the day to get where we're going. And I'll never forget seeing this church. It was a building in the middle of a field. I mean, it didn't even belong there. And that was the church in one of these villages that had been reached. And, you know, the trainers, because we were doing the training, they wanted to see kind of where they had to go. They wanted to give us that perspective. Even Joe said, hey, brothers, I didn't want to take it easy on you guys the first trip. And it was hard. But when we got there, I'll never forget. And we got inside the church, and you could see some of the members of that church. Now, this was like on a Tuesday. It wasn't like on a Sunday, but they all knew they were coming. And you could see, like, them. You looked them in the eye, and you could see that the gospel had reached them, had changed their lives in a way that you can't describe. And all I want, as I come back home, I told my wife, I said, Valerie, I just want people to see those faces in that environment where God has reached those people, where it once felt impossible, where it was so dark, where it was so unachievable. But with Christ, everything's possible. And to experience that and to see that gives me fuel to go, okay, we've got to reach these others. And so, again, through everything, when I wake up in the morning, through the company, mortgage, that's just a facade. I often call it a mortgage ministry because that's why we exist. Yeah. That's why we're here.
I like that. And that's, I think that's a perfect example of, I think you've gone much further than I have with anything we do here, but I think that's a perfect example of, this goes to why I wanted you on here as well, but the most influential people that I know in business, the people who do business well, there is always something behind that business. They didn't get into business to get into business. Yeah. They got into business because they have some sort of mission that they're trying to accomplish. Now, it may not always be missions, literally Christian missions related. It may not even be related to Christianity or the gospel at all. But the people who I know who do business really well have always had some sort of driving factor behind why they got into business outside of what that industry is. Yeah. And so I think you're an example of that. What would you tell? Let's say you're talking to. I'm trying to think of an example. Let's say you're talking to. Doesn't have to be a mortgage loan officer. Let's say you're talking to just somebody who is wanting to change careers. Let's say, and they're wanting to change careers because the career that they're in right now, the job that they have right now, doesn't allow them the flexibility or the funding or the whatever it may be, doesn't allow them the opportunity to chase after their passion and their mission and what God's called them to do. What advice would you give them from looking back over your life? What does their next steps need to be as far as not just taking action and leaving that and creating that opportunity, but what are some of the challenges that they're going to run into when they're driven by that underlying mission as opposed to just changing industries because they want to go get another paycheck?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a common question. I think at first we have to have an honest conversation. Sometimes when I'll sit down with somebody, I'm going to start with all the negative stuff. I'm just going to say, look, you're never going to be off. You're not going to work 8 to 5. It's a 24/7 gig. And you have to be committed to this. And you have to be committed to your client. You have to be committed to the consumer in a way that you've never been before. And then a lot of times you're going to be committed to somebody, you're going to work with somebody, and then you may not be part of the transaction after that. There's a lot of nuances in our business that cause opportunities for them to have to go somewhere else sometimes. And I even know realtors where they've worked with somebody for 6 months and decide, hey, I'm going to go move to a different state now, or something changes. So, if you're still interested after that hard stuff, I think the biggest challenge that we see is that people see what we do for a living, or a real estate agent, for example, and they see the successful ones. I think I even seen it on Facebook today. I say this all the time. The 1% exists because they're willing to do what the 99% is not willing to do. And I think sometimes people look at our industry through this rose-colored glasses where they feel like, hey, I want to be successful. I want to be like Jaylon. I want to be like, Max. I want to be like these guys. And what they don't see is what they don't see. They don't see behind the scenes. They don't see the grind. They don't see the hard work. They don't see all that stuff. And so I think it starts with an honest conversation to say, look, you're about to enter in a world that's not sunshine and rainbows. It's hard. It's very hard. It will hurt your feelings. You have to have thick skin. You can't look behind you. Very much like the gospel. Jesus said, the one that's fit, is at the plow and he looks behind, he's not fit for my minute. You're like, you have to continue to look forward and every step of the way. But if you're willing to do that, it certainly affords you the flexibility. It affords you those perks. If you look at it for the flexibility, I've seen loan officers come and go all the time because they came and say, hey, I love the fact that I'm not tied to my desk. I love the fact that I make my own hours and all this other. And I'm thinking, you're not going to make it. If that's the reason you're here. Now, if you are willing to do all the other work, if you're willing to do all the stuff that no one's willing to do, you'll be afforded those things. And so, I think that's the first thing that I would want to tell them. And I think when you get there, obviously you're going to be able to make those impacts, whether it's the ministry, like I want to make, whether it's family, it could be a charity, it could just be straight up, hey, I just want a yacht. I want to be successful. Hey, more power to you. And if that's what you want to do, that's awesome. This business can allow that. But I think you have to have your perspective and your priorities and understand those. I will say one of my biggest challenges in this business, for me personally, I have probably quoted, this is something I've said over the last couple of years. I want to provide for my family without stealing from them. And that is really, really hard because anybody in this business knows. If anybody's watching this later and they're a real estate agent, they're an insurance agent, they're an MLO, or they're a financial advisor, or what have you. If you're independent in anything, the old joke is, hey, you want to get busy, go on vacation. You want to get busy, take a break. Go somewhere and get away. Because that's when your phone's going to ring. It never rings. It rings at the most inopportune time. The challenge is that you're sitting there and you're spending time with your family and the phone rings. You're thinking, hey, that could be a paycheck. And how do you manage that? How do you balance that out? Sometimes you just have to go, listen, my family means more. Not everything's on fire. Not everything has to be done right this second. I am more than willing to draft a pre-approval letter at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday or a Sunday. I have no problem. I've done hundreds of those. The question is, do I have to do every single one that way? So you have to be able to manage that expectation, know when something's on fire, and you step away from your family, but then also know when, hey, I've got to pay attention to my family. The most important thing is the family, above all. For me, it's my wife. Secondly, it's my kids. And thirdly, it's the ministry and what we're doing, which really it kind of coincides with the business, and all that's a distant third. But if it's distanced itself so far, you think, okay, I can't be successful. I think that's crazy. I hate this whole thing where people say it's business, it's not personal. Everything's personal. Everything's personal. And
you do business with people is personal.
Yeah, but it's also a matter of trust. Who you put your trust in. Am I putting my trust in my referral network, or am I putting my trust in the Lord? Am I truly, what is faith? Think about it.
Yeah.
Faith is what we don't see and what we don't know even. And I think sometimes I just have to go, okay, God, I'm committing this company to you. I'm committing my career. I'm committing my dinner to you. Listen, I'm unemployed every month. I have to start over every month, and I have to put that in his hands. And, if I'm either going to trust him or I'm not, and I think he's going to honor me, in that way, if I honor him, he's going to honor and bless me if I spend my time with my family. And but that's a challenge. And I think those are the conversations I always have with loan officers that are kind of coming into this game. Say, hey, listen, it's an intriguing business. It's fun. There's a lot of stuff about it that I love. There's also a lot of stuff that no one ever wants to talk about.
Well, and I think, so there's the two major things that you mentioned there that I want to hit on for just a second, because I don't want to brush over them. They're extremely important. What you just said, you're talking to two different crowds. I want to make sure both crowds hear clearly what you just said, because, I think me and Max talked about this on the Silent podcast last week. And I'm sure we'll talk about it next week.
Let's get a lip reader to put that together. I heard that was really good. So
somebody told me that we need to get AI. Surely by this point, AI can
for
read
sure,
lips.
right?
But no. So there's power in social media, and so social media has this way of, especially with the real estate agents, the mortgage lender, and the insurance agent side, anybody who's present on social media and uses it for marketing. There's this image that people see that somebody who might be coming into the game of any of those industries, or those that are not coming into that, but just starting a career in anything. I think it's important for the younger crowd or the newer crowd to realize you don't know half of the work that goes into what you see on social media. What you see is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a tremendous amount of effort and work that goes into it. So I hear it all the time. It's part of the reason why I got into insurance is insurance agents are lazy. They're never in the office. They're always out. And while it is true for some people got into insurance to have that flexibility of schedule. The ones that that's not the case. The ones that and the ones that you recognize and the ones that are successful, they're not successful by sitting on their couch while their team is in the office working. They're successful by putting in a tremendous amount of effort, just like you said. The 1% are the 1% because they do what the 99% are not willing to do.
Right.
That also means how much effort, how much time are you spending actually dedicating to your job? Even though you're not required to be there 8 to 5, how much effort are you willing to put in before 8, after 5, weekends, vacations, whatever it may be? The conversation that you had, or the thing that you mentioned about family, I think that speaks to, all right, now let's talk to the other side of that coin. Let's talk to the ones who are chasing that recognition and the monetary success that comes with that. You get to the end of it and you realize that you've got the 4,000 awards sitting on your shelf, and your bank account looks better than it did 10 years ago, and whatever it may be that you define success. But then you look, and how many major events did you miss with your family? How many ball games of your kids did you miss? How many date nights did you postpone or reschedule because you were chasing that? And I love the way you said that. Love the phrase you used to say that. I want to provide for my family without robbing them. Yeah. And I think that is, that's a hard balance.
It is.
That is a really hard balance.
And I don't want to necessarily demonize those that are not into that. That's cool. I mean, I saw on the internet the other day, I follow Ryan Serhant. He's a sort of a famous, maybe infamous, he recently had a Netflix series. He's a real estate agent in New York. And I've been following him before the Netflix because he's got a heavy presence on social media. But anyway, he was being interviewed and said, how do you handle work-life balance, or do you believe in work-life balance? And his immediate response was no. He says, I don't. And he said in the 3 phases of his life, he said, I feel like I'm a great leader in my company and in my industry. I'm a good father, and I'm an okay husband. That's coming from his. And he seems to be okay with that. I'm not.
No,
like, that's cool. Like, and he is going to dominate. He's going to do really well, and that's great. For the sake of dominating, if that's your goal. But to me, man, if I lose my family in this is a non-starter. Mm-hmm. I really don't care what the widget is in my life to provide. It just can't sacrifice the time of my family. Listen, I just turned 50. I've got a 20-year-old at Auburn. I've got a 18-year-old on his way there. And, I remember like it was yesterday when they were babies. And, I remember being in that time of my life thinking, oh, it goes by fast and all that. And like, yeah. It really does. And, so I can't do anything about any time that I may have missed in the past. I feel like I've, taken advantage of it, but I'd be remiss. Listen, the last 20 years of my life, I have missed out on things. And I realize even my kids have said sometimes where, I'm at home, but I'm not at home. They know that I'm always working. And there's a part of me that's like, okay, well, at least I've exemplified hard work and work ethic and all that. But certainly, now if the Lord gives me another 20 years, I want to make sure these next 20 years is really focused around them. It's honoring Him with what He's given me. And then obviously, I can't take those awards with me. I can't take what riches or whatever comforts that I seek in this world with me. But, the impact in that lady that I met in Senegal, or I'm sorry, Guinea-Bissau actually was that one. But when you meet those people and the impact that you make there, you will get to see them. You get to keep those. And to me, that's what it's all about. And at the end of the day, it's the connection that we have with people. I remember a great man told me recently, talking about the process. He goes, yeah, you businessmen, people in the military, you got all about process. And he said he acknowledged he's not really good in the process. He said the process sometimes slow. He said, but remember this, and it stuck with me. He said, people are more important than the process. People are always more important than that. The process is important, but the people is really the reason. That's the purpose behind everything. And I just think about that. And now as I've gotten older and I've gotten a little bit different perspective, it's not, Lord, help me be successful so that I could be successful for me. Great. If you decide to allow me to have that success, I want to reciprocate that back to others. And it's not about me anymore. And I think there was a period of time in my life that probably was. I dreamt of having this and having that. Growing up, not with a lot of money, growing up poor, I wanted to have nice things. But when I look around, I do. I already have. I've got a great family. I'm living the dream. And so why do I need more things? So I had a loan officer that recently joined me, really, really good friend of mine. And he's in the ministry, and he brought me to his house. This was back in like October, November last year. And we were talking about him becoming a loan officer. And he said, so is there anything that you fear of me doing this job? And I think he was probably thinking about our relationship. We're really close. And I said, my biggest fear is that I've not done a good job or how I can explain how difficult this work is. I just want you to understand when you come in here, it's not going to be easy. Now we're going to have fun. We're going to have a good time. But there's going to be some months where you're like, man, I'm making a lot of money. And there are going to be some months where, hey, really hard. Save the milk. Yeah. It's going to be hard. And I wish it was raining down loans every single month. I wish it was, I wish business was successful every single day. But I think if we keep our focus, our priorities where they need to be, I have this weird belief that, God will provide what He needs to provide, and He'll guide us where we need to be guided. We just have to listen, and we have to move forward with that and be satisfied with that. Sure. And I'm a work in progress. So like I said, I'm not perfect, and I struggle in a lot of those areas, and I just want to get better than I was yesterday. Yeah.
Well, and I know you're going to have to go here in a little bit, pick up your daughter. Speaking of family time, you're going to have to go pick up your daughter. But one thing I wanted to, if I had to summarize at least my favorite part of this conversation and leave them with something, all of what you just talked about is great and wonderful, and you have made it very clear what your mission is and what is important in your life. And I'd love to have you back on another time to talk. Let's dive deep into some of those stories of the mission field and really hone in and focus on those. I'd like to do that at some point. Sure. But the underlying message there is that you found something that was a priority to you. Missions and family. Let me rephrase that. your faith, then because of your faith, missions and your family are the three main priorities in your life. And then work is just a way that you provide to do that. It's a way that you provide resources for your family, and then it's a way to provide the mission work. And I think certainly that's God ordained. There's a reason that you're in this field, and obviously you didn't like it to begin with, and then you found your way into this.
Wasn't going to choose it. No.
And I think there's a reason for that. But again, the underlying message is that you found what your focus and your priority is. I think what a lot of people have to define for themselves is, what is your priority? Is your family your priority? Is your faith your priority? Or is your work your priority? The real estate agent you're talking about sounds like that work is his main priority.
Yeah.
And not that any one thing in that is bad or wrong. It's just, if you don't define what that priority is, then the urgent will become your priority. Your work will become, everything's on fire. Your family, everything's on fire. Next thing you know, you're approaching divorce and you've got to fix that. You have to define what your priority is before ever starting that endeavor, so that you can keep that the main thing. Keep the main thing the main thing. And so, I know Patrick Bet-David, if anybody listens to his podcast, one thing that I found interesting about him that he said was specifically, you were talking about how your kids mention you're home, but you're not at home, and at least you've exemplified hard work. That was something that he said was, and I don't know that I agree with this. I don't know where I stand on this. I'm still trying to figure out that balance myself.
Oh, me too.
But one thing that I love that he said, to give some perspective on it, is he worked really, really hard and sacrificed a ton of time with his family, knowing that he was sacrificing a ton of time for his family, but in the back of his mind, justifying it, or at least doing it for the example of his kids. He wanted to set an example in his kids that the man's job in the family is to provide and to work hard and to display that level of work ethic. Right. And so, same way with him. If that's your priority, is to show your kids how hard you can work, go for it. But you can't do anything successfully without first defining what is your mission, what is your priority, and how are you going to keep that the main thing.
You have to define success. I mean, for example, if I'm being honest, I'll never forget when I was in the 6th grade. I grew up in South Florida, by the way, as a child. I didn't move here till I was about high school. And but 6th grader teacher, she said, "Hey, write down an essay. We're gonna do an essay exercise, and we want you to write down what you want to do when you grow up." And I just idolized my parents, and I wrote an essay about family. I wanted to be a dad. I wanted to be, I want to be the father that my father was to me. I wanted to be a husband, and how I saw my dad treat my mom. And my dad was my hero growing up. So obviously the accident, and when he passed away, there's a part of me that passed away. I still to this day struggle. I would love it if Dad could see what we're doing now. I wish he could know his grandchildren. And there's some really tough moments there, reconciling that and just dealing with that. But I was a 6th grader. I was in elementary school, basically, and I'm writing an essay. My dream is to have a family, to have the white picket fence and the dog and I had it all in there. And of course, all my friends, they're writing, I want to be an astronaut, baseball player, nurse, doctor, all the typical stuff. And I look up today, who cares if I'm doing mortgages? Who cares if I'm in the grocery bill? Who cares what I'm doing? I'm living that dream, literally. I even have the fence. It's not white. It's a brown fence, but I've got the dogs. I've got the whole 9 yards. And so regardless of what's in my bank account or whatever's going on in my life, I'm literally a manifestation of my dream that the Lord has given me. How or why could I even ask for anything else? So I think you define success, and you just, you chase it. And sometimes it finds you. Honestly, I don't know if I have anything to do with what we have. I know that God is just, again, I've never saw myself as great at anything. But I try. I do the best I can. But I'll say this. It was in a church service a few weeks ago. It made an impact on me. There was a couple that came up and presented themselves to the pastor, to the church, and they wanted to join the church. And the lady had said, "Hey, I had never been baptized, and I want to come and be baptized." And the husband standing there, and his tears were just coming down his face. And all I was just looking at him. I could not look at him. And I thought to myself, if you're in the ministry, if you're a man or you're a woman in faith, how could you not want to be part of that, of them? And what I mean by that is being part of the change that God can make on a person, the heart change, but the life change, and changing lives in a way that we've seen God do, not just in Africa, but right here in our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Why would you not? When I ask, of course, I want to be part of that. And whether that's doing mortgages, whether that's preaching, whether that's just doing a podcast with you, whether that's sitting having coffee and then just enjoying testimonies of things that God is doing in our lives, man, like when you experience that, you want more of that. And so to me, success is obviously however you define it. But it's in those times when I realize that I don't have to be Ryan Serhant in New York. There's a lot of things about Ryan Serhant, by the way, that I'm like, that's pretty cool. I like that. I've watched that, and I'm not even a real estate agent. I've watched that Netflix series twice. My wife and I both have watched it because there's a lot of things like, that's kind of like what you do here. It's funny. And they're actually going to have another series, I think, part 2. So I'm definitely intrigued by his life and what he's doing, and I think it's awesome. But I don't have to be Ryan, and you don't have to be me, and I don't have to be you. You know, God made you for a purpose. You made me for a purpose. And I always tell people this all the time. I tell all my loan officers, everybody that works for me, I say, listen, you look in the mirror and you be proud of that. God made you. He made you to be you, not to be someone else, not to have someone else's dream. Your dream manifested in what God is going to do for you. It may not be the 6th grade essay that you wrote, but it may be something else. And just embrace that. Just embrace how he made you. And I think we live in a world, unfortunately, with social media and magazines and everything else, that we're just all this stuff, we're reminded of what we're not. And I just want to remind people today, look, be reminded of who you are. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing. Embrace who you are. And I think that God will honor that. You honor him, and you'll be successful. And that success may not be, again, what the world says is successful. The world does not say that having a wife, children, a picket fence, and a dog is whatever. But to me, that's pretty good. I'll take it. So,
yeah, and I think that the less that the world defines that as success, the more people start to see that really is a success.
100%.
The further we get away from that, the more people realize how important that is because they had it growing up or something.
I hope so. Yeah,
but
for sure.
Man, I appreciate you coming on here.
Yeah, that's cool.
I would be doing the audience a disservice if I didn't ask this. If there is somebody that's listening that wants to get involved with the mission work that you're doing over in Africa, how do they reach out to you? How do they get in touch with you, or what do they do to get involved?
Man, call me. You could put it on the podcast or whatever. Just text me 256-486-8368. You could email me also at Robby@RedmondLending.com. There's numerous ways of reaching me. But if anybody's even remotely interested, text me and I'll have coffee with you. I'll come to your church. I'll talk to you privately. Because honestly, there's really nothing I'd rather more talk about, honestly. I shouldn't say that as a mortgage professional, but who wants to talk about mortgages, right?
No, but that's your mission, man. That's your mission. That's
but
your why.
You want to talk about FHA, conventional bank statement, all that stuff, we can do that too. But yeah, absolutely. Just give me a call. Yeah. And I'm more than happy to talk about that.
Well, I'm very appreciative that you decided to come on here. Again, we're going to have you on here again to talk more, awesome. Dive deep into the mission work that you're doing.
I'd love to.
I want to hear some stories about you going into the bush, and I want to hear more stories about that. So.
Yeah, a lot of that's not so complimentary for me, but it's good. It's good though. It's really cool stuff though. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Robby, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks.